Chapter 2. The Mobile Laboratory. The handshake lingered in the grimy air of Leo's apartment, long after their hands had parted. For Alistair, the contact felt like a brand, a final searing seal on a pact he could never undo. He had crossed a threshold, and the familiar world of academic rigor and quiet domesticity was now a distant shore, receding with every breath he took in this den of petty crime. For Leo, the handshake was an electric jolt, a surge of terrifying, exhilarating possibility. The man before him was no longer just the boring, droning professor he remembered. He was a lifeline, a key to a world of wealth and respect Leo had only ever dreamed of. "Okay," Leo said, his voice buzzing with a newfound energy. "Okay, Professor. So what's the plan? We can't exactly brew this stuff in my kitchen. The fumes would probably peel the wallpaper. Not that anyone would notice." Alistair's gaze swept over the squalor of the apartment, his lip curling in distaste. "No, Mr. Gable. We will not be brewing here. We need a space that is mobile, untraceable, and above all clean. I cannot work in these conditions. The slightest impurity could destabilize the entire sequence." "Mobile and untraceable," Leo repeated, scratching his greasy hair. "You mean like a tent? I know a guy who can get us a tent with a misperception ward. Aurors walk right by it, long as they don't trip on the ropes." Alistair fixed him with a withering stare. "A tent? Do I look like a man who works in a tent? No. We need something more robust, something that can blend in, yet be entirely self-contained. Something from the Muggle world." The idea had been forming in his mind since his visit to Gideon's office. The Ministry was looking for wizards. They were searching for magical signatures, for hidden rooms and warded cellars. They would not be looking for a dilapidated Muggle camper van rattling down a country lane. "I've heard of them," Alistair continued, the plan solidifying as he spoke. "They call them recreational vehicles. Muggles use them for holidays. They are, in essence, mobile homes." Leo's eyes widened. A Muggle camper van. "You want to cook Class A potions in a tin can on wheels?" "It is the perfect disguise," Alistair said, a flicker of his old professorial arrogance surfacing. "And with a standard undetectable extension charm, the interior will be more than adequate for a state-of-the-art laboratory. Your task, Mr. Gable, is to acquire such a vehicle, and the necessary equipment. I will provide you with a list. And the galleons." He reached into his robes and produced a small, heavy bag that clinked with the sound of his dwindling savings. It was the money he and Eleonora had set aside for their son's future, for a new roof, for a life that was no longer his to live. He dropped the bag on the table, the thud echoing the fall of his own morality. 3 days later, Alistair stood on a desolate, windswept moor on the outskirts of Yorkshire, the air crisp and cold. Before him stood his new laboratory. It was a monstrosity. The recreational vehicle was a relic from a forgotten Muggle decade, a hulking beast of faded beige and rust-brown stripes. One of the tires was flat, and a window was cracked and patched with some kind of Muggle adhesive tape. Leo stood beside it, beaming with pride. "Well, what do you think? She's a beauty, huh? Got it off a Muggle-born who owed me a favor. He said it used to belong to his granddad." Alistair surveyed the vehicle with a deep sense of despair. This was his legacy? This monument to Muggle mediocrity? "It is profoundly ugly," he stated. "Yeah, but it's the inside that counts, right?" Leo said, wrenching the flimsy door open with a groan of protesting metal. "Check it out." Alistair stepped inside and was genuinely surprised. The cramped, musty interior of the camper van had been replaced by a space that was at least 4 times its original size. The undetectable extension charm had worked. The space was clean, sterile, and lined with gleaming copper pipes, crystal beakers, and a row of brand-new pewter cauldrons that Leo had clearly acquired from a more reputable source. A large ventilation hood, enchanted to scrub fumes and vent them as odorless, invisible vapor, was installed over the main workstation. "The equipment is acceptable," Alistair conceded, running a finger over a pristine silver stirring rod. He felt a familiar pull, the quiet hum of potential that always came when he was in a well-stocked laboratory. It was the only place he had ever truly felt in command. "Acceptable. Professor, this is the best stuff money can buy," Leo exclaimed. "That self-stirring cauldron alone cost more than my last 3 rent payments." "Quality is not a luxury, Mr. Gable. It is a necessity," Alistair said, his focus already shifting to the task at hand. "Now leave me. I require absolute concentration for the initial sequence. The infusion of lacewing flies must be timed to the precise moment the fluxweed reaches its 3rd boil. Any deviation and the entire batch will be inert." Leo, looking slightly chastened, backed out of the enchanted space, closing the door behind him, Alistair was left alone in his strange new kingdom. He took a deep, steadying breath. The familiar sense of the ingredients were a comfort. He lit the flame under the primary cauldron with a flick of his wand. As the water began to heat, the low, rhythmic bubbling was a balm to his frayed nerves. Here, surrounded by the precise, unforgiving laws of potion-making, the chaos of his life receded. There was no terminal diagnosis, no mountain of debt, no disappointed wife. There was only the process, the careful measurements, the patient waiting, the subtle dance of magical energies. For the first time in months, Alistair Finch felt a sense of peace. It was the peace of a master at his work, a craftsman in his element. He was no longer just a dying professor. He was a creator. Outside, Leo paced nervously, kicking at loose stones on the moor. He could hear the faint, rhythmic bubbling from within the camper, a sound that seemed to count down the seconds of his new life as a high-stakes criminal. 1 hour passed, then 2. The sun began to dip towards the horizon, painting the desolate landscape in hues of orange and purple. Leo's anxiety grew with each passing moment. He had sunk every galleon Alistair had given him, and a good chunk of his own, into this venture. If the old man failed, if he blew himself up, they were both ruined. Finally, the groaning door of the camper swung open. Alistair emerged, looking paler and more exhausted than Leo had ever seen him, but his eyes held a triumphant gleam. In his hands he held a single large flask. Inside, a liquid of the most brilliant, luminous blue swirled gently. It seemed to drink the fading sunlight, glowing with a power that was both beautiful and terrifying. Is that it? Leo breathed, his eyes wide. 150 milliliters of flawless Felix Felicis, Alistair said, his voice laced with a pride he hadn't felt in years. 99.1% pure, an unprecedented achievement. Leo let out a whoop of joy, a loud, unrestrained sound that seemed to startle the very sheep grazing in the distance. We did it. We're rich. We're gonna be rich. Contain yourself, Mr. Gable, Alistair snapped, though without any real heat. We have done nothing yet. The product is worthless until it is sold. That is where your expertise comes into play. He carefully decanted the glowing blue liquid into a series of smaller vials, each one a perfect, shimmering dose of pure luck. The challenge now was turning that luck into galleons. Their first attempt at a sale was a disaster. Leo, overconfident, had arranged a meeting with a low-level dealer he knew in the back room of a grimy pub in Hogsmeade. The dealer, a shifty-eyed wizard with more bravado than brains, took one look at the vial and laughed. Liquid luck? This blue stuff? You trying to sell me hair regrowing potions, Sparky? The dealer sneered. Everyone knows Felix Felicis is gold. This is different, Leo insisted. This is pure, better. The color is a side effect of the purity. The dealer was unconvinced. The meeting ended with Leo being thrown out of the pub, the vial of priceless potion still in his pocket. He returned to Alistair, who was waiting anxiously in the camper van, now parked in a dark, secluded wood. They do not understand the product, Alistair surmised after Leo recounted the humiliating experience. We are artists attempting to sell a masterpiece to a public that only values forgeries. We need a different kind of buyer. Someone with the vision to recognize quality, and the ruthlessness to handle it. Leo's face grew pale. You mean we have to go bigger? To the serious players? We have no choice, Alistair said, his voice grim. Our savings are gone. We cannot afford to sit on this product. There was only one name that came to Leo's mind, a name whispered with fear and reverence in the darkest corners of Nocturne Alley. Corvus Lestrange. He was not a dealer. He was a madman, a violent, unhinged dark wizard who controlled his turf through sheer terror. To do business with Corvus was to dance with a dragon. I can get a message to him, Leo said, his voice barely a whisper. But Professor, this is a different league. This guy, he uses unforgivable curses like other people use punctuation. Alistair looked at the rows of glowing blue vials lining the shelf in the camper. Each one was a step further away from the man he used to be. He thought of Eleonora's worried face, of the mounting bills, of the shadow growing inside him. The fear was still there, a cold knot in his stomach, but it was now intertwined with something else, a grim, unyielding resolve. Set up the meeting, Mr. Gable, he said, his voice as cold and clear as the crystal vials before him. It is time they learned who we are. Leo nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the new dangerous path they were about to take. He left the camper, the weight of his task pressing down on him. Alistair remained behind, the cool blue light of his creation reflecting in his eyes. He was no longer just a professor, a husband, or a dying man. He was a producer of a dangerous, beautiful thing, and he was about to step onto a very dark stage.